on February 1st, and now it's February 4th, but we have signed documents, and Trump is saber-rattling about this whole thing. People are taking it a little bit more seriously than they've taken it up till now, so that's interesting, and that's where we're starting the show. There's way more to talk about with regards to Trump, the tariffs, the fentanyl, the border, all of that stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Kendi's anti-racist research is shut down at the University of Boston, so that's interesting. His whole program gone, laying people off, and maybe he's gone. I don't know if he's still a professor there. I'm not sure. But that's an interesting thing. Update on Prorogue. We've heard from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and they've got an update. The Andrew Scheer looking guy is giving us an update. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, and he looks like Andrew Scheer. So he's going to give us an update. And DOGE is finding improper payments. They gained access to a payment processor, a payment system that was giving out something like trillions of dollars a year, and they're going through it. And so that's interesting. We need that in Canada. Why don't we have a party that's promising that, Mark Carney? I don't think so, right? Why is Mark Carney in contact with senior government cabinet members? Are other Liberal leadership candidates in contact with the Liberal candidate or cabinet? I honestly don't know. Seems weird that Mark Carney is, right? And like if Chrystia Freeland isn't, it's even more strange. No red states are getting alcohol from BC anyway, or no red states are getting alcohol orders from BC, I guess. So that's the response from the tariff fight. And what else? Canada announces retaliatory tariff package, and Trump is going to increase the tariffs if Canada does that. So it's a wild and crazy day. Everything is kind of up in the air still. And it seems like, to me, these little delays and things like that seem like Canada doesn't want the tariffs. I don't think Trump wants to put the tariffs on. He wants to pressure Canada. Like, this is not a single layer of things going on with these tariffs. There are other things happening with regards to the tariffs. It's meant to put pressure on the government, meant to get action. That's Trump's, Lutnick said that the other day. So Trump's representative is saying these tariffs are to force you to move in this direction. We want this outcome. We want you to close your borders. We want you to stop the fentanyl. That's what we want. Please do that. And if we do that, we can avoid the tariffs. So does this escalation, being the signature Trump saber rattling, mean the tariffs are going to definitely be on February 4th? After the 2 delays already, I'm going to say probably not. But if we don't do something that is yet undetermined by me, but I think probably the top people know it, that has to do with fentanyl and border. If we don't reach some milestone that Trump wants, then the tariffs are going to go in. And if not, then it's going to go on business as usual until March 1st, when he's going to saber rattle again. And so I don't know what's going to happen, honestly, but there's a lot that's happened yesterday, so we're going through it. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Freedom Force is highlighting what Donald Trump said on Truth Social. He says, today I've implemented a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, 10% on energy in Canada, and a 10% additional tariff on China. This was done through the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, because of the major threat of illegal aliens and deadly drugs killing our citizens, including fentanyl. We need to protect Americans, and it's my duty as president to ensure the safety of all. I made a promise on my campaign to stop the flood of illegal aliens and drugs from pouring across our borders, and Americans overwhelmingly voted in favor of it. So there you go. We're going to move forward with this. Trudeau is responding to this. He says the United States has confirmed that it intends to impose a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods, with 10% tariffs on energy starting February 4th. I've met with the premiers and our cabinet today, and I'll be speaking with President Sheinbaum of Mexico shortly. We did not want this, but Canada is prepared. I'll be addressing Canadians later this evening. And notable missing phone call here is a phone call to President Trump, right? I will be talking to President Trump about this shortly. He hasn't talked to Trump since the inauguration, right? So that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Ben Banka says Canada is acting like they didn't destroy their own country right now. The tariffs are barely higher than the planned tax increase by the Liberal government coming in April 2025. If the USA hadn't used tariffs, Canada would have taxed themselves the same amount or more. Time for a regime change. Time for more than that. Ryan says the red indicates how many days you work for federal, provincial, and municipal taxes in Canada if you wanted to pay them all up front. Every dollar you earn up until June 13th goes to taxes, and that doesn't include sales taxes, fuel taxes, and more. We work for taxes. This is according to the Fraser Institute, and it's based on, your average Canadian worker, right? It's not you necessarily, but if you make under X amount, probably $50,000 a year or something like that, I think that's that's an average, right? Then you work 6 months of the year for the government. The rest of the money you get to keep to pay, all your bills for the year. But you work 6 months of the year just to hand money over to the government. Thank goodness we've got free healthcare, right? Free. Is it free? You hand over half your salary, half your year, right? CP24 says Ottawa to hear formal announcement on U.S. tariffs shortly. U.S. tariffs shortly. That's CP24. That was the first kind of salvo I saw of official documents yesterday. Maxime Bernier says it's important to understand that the 25% tariffs announced by President Trump are not imposed on Canada. They will be paid by American consumers and businesses who buy goods imported from Canada. Tariffs are a tax, and Americans who will have to pay more or go without our products will be the first to suffer. Of course, Canadian exporters of these goods will, as a consequence, lose clients, contracts, and sales, and will be forced to cut down on production and lay off workers, or they will lower their prices to keep market shares and will see their profits diminish. Because 75% of our exports go south of the border, our economy will for sure be very negatively impacted by this. The stupidest thing our government can do, however, to deal with this crisis is to impose the same kind of tariffs dollar for dollar against the U.S. imports. The U.S. economy is 10 times bigger than ours, much less reliant on trade than ours, and much less dependent on our market than we are on theirs. Not only would retaliatory tariffs have much less impact on American exporters, they would immediately impoverish Canadian consumers forced to pay more for imported goods, as well as destabilize Canadian businesses that need inputs from the U.S. in their production process. It would more than double the harm the U.S. tariffs to our economy. Trade wars are bad for everyone, but they are much worse for a small country with fewer options. We simply cannot win a trade war with the U.S. It's very unlikely that Trump will back down. All we will do is provoke a massive economic crisis in Canada until we are forced to capitulate. Another self-destructive thing to do would be to set up giant pandemic-level bailout plans to support everyone affected by this trade war. This will simply bankrupt our government even more than they already are, and make us even weaker. So what should we do? 1, double down on efforts to control our border, crack down on fentanyl dealers, deport all illegals, and impose a complete moratorium on immigration to answer Trump's immediate concerns about Canada. 2, tell the administration that we are ready to renegotiate North American free trade and put dairy supply management and other contentious issues on the table. Wait and see to what extent Trump is willing to keep tariffs in place despite the harm it does to the U.S. economy. Despite his pretenses that Americans don't need our stuff, the reality is that, on the contrary, they have few options for crucial resources like oil, lumber, uranium, and other minerals. He will stop acting like a bully when he sees that he can get more results by sitting down and negotiating. To reduce our dependence on the U.S. market, immediately implement an ambitious plan to tear down interprovincial trade barriers and help our impacted exporting industries find alternative markets in other countries. I mean, couldn't Alberta sell the oil to the eastern provinces and replace Saudi Arabia and keep all that money in Canada? No, they can't do that. Implement a series of bold reforms to make our economy more productive, including reduce corporate and personal taxes, abolish capital gains, abolish all corporate subsidies, get rid of excessive regulation, remove impediments to exploration and export of natural resources, drastically cut government spending, mandate Bank of Canada to stop printing money and start accumulating a gold reserve to prepare for the global monetary reset, which is likely part of Trump's plan. In short, instead of adopting a suicidal strategy to confront Trump, we must do what we should have done a long time ago to strengthen our economy and our bargaining position. The transition will be rough, but not as much as complete bankruptcy and disintegration or absorption into the United States. Absorption into the United States is the easiest way to disengage with politics and keep everything the way it is right now, basically. And a lot of people are just fine with that. It's more complicated than that for me. I think that Canada having its governing structure dissolved actually solves a lot of problems that are difficult and probably not going to be solved by Pierre Poilievre or any of the rest of our corrupt government. The Conservative Party mostly, and certainly everybody in leadership now, right? So they're controlled by China. They're controlled by foreign interference, foreign influence, And we know that, but we can't do anything to stop it. And they're starting a trade war with our biggest trading partner, and they're trying to pass censorship laws. So at this point in time, I'm short of a full-blown revolution, and most people just want to hang out and watch TV. Like, they don't want to have a revolution. They just want to watch television. So short of a full-blown revolution, which is unlikely, Canada is going to languish. And the fastest way to most Canadians getting what they want, which is to watch TV, is to just allow us to be absorbed by the United States. And on the track we're on, doing what we're doing, I think that's probably, within 2 years? A lot of people are saying somebody was saying within 90 days. I don't know, that's a little fast. I don't think so, right? Like over a summer, Canada gets taken over. Could it be that fast? I don't know, but somebody was saying 2 years seems like a pretty reasonable timeline, because people will get sick and tired of the trade war over that period of time and capitulate and allow Trump to get what he wants. So who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Here's Pierre Poilievre. And I think that it's interesting that Maxime Bernier's plan is different than the Liberal plan. And it doesn't seem like Pierre Poilievre's plan is different than the Liberal plan. So that's weird. I like Maxime Bernier's plan better. Here's Pierre Poilievre. He said, "We must put Canada first. That is why common sense conservatives condemn President Trump's massive, unjust and unjustified tariffs on Canada's already weak economy. Canada is the United States' closest neighbor, greatest ally, and best friend. We share the longest undefended border and fought alongside Americans in 2 world wars, Korea and Afghanistan, where 158 of our brave men and women died helping the U.S. avenge the 9/11 attacks. There is no justification whatsoever for this treatment." We joined a war to avenge the 9/11 attacks? I mean, yikes, right? I thought we were bringing freedom and democracy to the Middle East. Now it was a vengeance thing? Huh. Well, interesting, I guess. And everybody's just cool with that. Huh. The Liberals must, back to this, put aside their partisan interests and recall Parliament now to pass a Canada First plan. So he's like, listen, we're not going to go for an election first. We're going to pass this Canada First plan. And we're going to talk about Team Canada and what Team Canada means in a minute. But this is Poilievre's Canada First plan. 1, the Canada First plan will retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs carefully aimed at maximizing impact on American companies while minimizing impact on Canadian consumers. That means targeting U.S. products that we can make ourselves, buy elsewhere, or do without. For example, we must retaliate against American steel and aluminum as Canadians make those vital products at home. Do we? I thought we just imported Chinese steel and stamped it with Made in Canada. No, we don't do that anymore. Put all the tariffs revenues into help for affected workers and businesses. Governments should not keep a dime of the new revenue because it's a tax. Pass a massive emergency bring it home tax cut to bolster the economy, stop inflation, and save and create jobs. Canada needs a massive tax cut on work, investment, energy, home building, and making stuff at home. The Liberal carbon tax and capital gains tax hikes must be first on the chopping block. 4, immediately scrap the Liberal anti-resource law C-69 and greenlight LNG plants, pipelines, mines, factories, and port expansions to overseas markets. Bring in truly free trade within Canada by knocking down interprovincial barriers to help replace the lost north-south trade with east-west trade and to make us self-reliant. 6, rebuild our military and take back control of our borders to regain the confidence of our partners and assert our sovereignty, protect our people, and put Canada first. We will protect our economy, defend our sovereignty, bring home production and paychecks, and never back down. We will put Canada first, now and always. Canada first is the new... they're testing that one. Is that the new slogan? Canada first? Mr. Surveillance, try that one again. Condemning President Trump's tariffs without condemning the massive human trafficking problem, drug smuggling epidemic, and money laundering capital Canada has become under Justin Trudeau is disingenuous, and frankly, it's what everyone is afraid of. A more of the same status quo. Yeah. It sounds like the Liberal plan, like Justin Trudeau could have come up with that plan. Mark Carney could have come up with that plan. Chrystia Freeland could have twitched through that plan. Rand Paul says, tariffs are simply taxes. Conservatives once united against new taxes. Taxing trade will mean less trade and higher prices. The point of the tariffs for Canada, in my opinion anyway, is to put pressure on our government and I mean, indeed, the Mexico government as well, to do what Trump says. And I think that it's his leverage. He's flexing his leverage. And I I think that he's making the right moves for his country. I think that he's doing the correct thing. And people are saying, well, he needs Canada. He needs Canada's energy. He needs this. He needs that. Yeah, but he doesn't need Canada's government allowing foreign nationals to walk in. He doesn't need Canada's government turning a blind eye to fentanyl labs. And is it worth paying? Is it worth the structure of what Trump's proposing to the Americans to get the result that he wants? Like, Trump's a salesman. He's saying, here's the value proposition. I'm going to use the economic might of the United States to bring these countries in line. Cool. And they said, yes, please. And so I don't know that they're now going to say, listen, man, I'm not happy that my Canadian import costs more. I just don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that they're going to say, how do we solve this problem? And Trump's going to say, no problems. We'll source tomatoes somewhere else. We'll source this somewhere else. We'll source this somewhere else. Or we're going to onboard Canada as a state. But that's a little longer term. I don't think that would be his response to somebody calling him up and saying, I have a problem with what's going on here. Because when Ford calls him up and says, where am I going to get my brake pads from? I used to get them from Ontario. What do we do now? He says, make the brake pads here. Hire a bunch of people and make the brake pads here. We'll give you a subsidy from the United States government. Cool. And they'll say, F yes. Like, sure, that's great. Thank you very much. That's a solution that they can action and do it in a relatively short amount of time. Hire a shit ton of Americans. Who's losing on that? Canada, right? America's not going to pine for Canada and say, oh, Canada, please, can we have your brake pads? They don't give a shit. Okay, if they could hire a bunch of Americans and do it in 6 weeks and spin up a factory because Trump wants to build a factory, they're going to do it. And that's why we lose. Okay, and it's like the Canada Post strike. So, like, do people not understand this? Like, we are digging our own grave right now doing what we're doing. So it's the stupidest thing we could possibly do. Secure the borders, deport the illegals, stop the fentanyl. What's hard about that? They've got the apparatus of the state, and now they're saying, "Oh yeah, we've got to do dollar for dollar tariffs. We're gonna beat this a-hole who wants us to secure our borders and get the drugs out of here." Okay, dummies. Here's Trump's counter to Canada putting on reciprocal the counter tariffs. Here we go.
Today from the United States, it wasn't just the tariffs. It wasn't just the ultimatum on fentanyl. There was also a warning that if Canada retaliates, the tariffs will increase. So there is a preemptive strike, or at least in terms of a message to the Canadian government, that if it retaliates with the targeted tariffs that it has been planning to, then the percentages will go up. This is something the president said. Remember when we were watching the video of him speaking in the Oval Office yesterday, he says the tariffs may go up, maybe not. He sort of floated it out there. Well, it's been communicated, I'm told, to the Canadian government that if there is a retaliation of any kind, then the U.S. will increase its trade action against this country. Now, that puts them in a very difficult position. I mean, what choice do you have but to retaliate?
Close the border, stop the fentanyl, deport the illegals. What choice do we have? We must do this. So I think this is interesting. This is Trump playing chess. In chess, you stake out your position, right? And you have to do it in front of your opponent. You say, I'm going to wage my war against you on the right-hand side of the board, and I'm going to develop the right-hand side of the board. And you do that. And as you're developing the right-hand side of the board, you put some other pieces out and things like that. As you put your piece out, you take control of pieces of spaces that you're not on, because your piece can impact those spaces. So when you move your rook or your pawn up one, now you've taken control of more of the board. And what Trump has done with this is he's taken control of the next move that Canada can take. Now he's put a pawn in the spot that controls the square for counter tariffs. If we move into that spot and place counter tariffs, Trump's pawn's just going to take us by increasing the tariffs, right? Chess move made, and the counter move is now like, do you still make that move? Like, ruh-roh, Shaggy, right? Like, it looks like he knew what we were gonna do. This diplomacy thing on the internet is not working anymore, right? Like, and so Trump's already countered Canada's first counter move, and what do? So Brett says Justin Trudeau gets a smug look wiped off his face. Reporter, when did you first learn that President Trump intends to increase tariffs if Canada retaliates? And how has that changed your strategy? So you're not going to move into that obvious trap right there, right? Where the piece that you're going to move is going to get taken by President Trump. You're not going to move into that? Oh, well, we have a very robust response. Here's Trudeau.
When did you first learn that President Trump intends to increase tariffs if Canada retaliates, and how has that changed your strategy?
I think Canadians understand that we need to respond to this. We need to respond in a way that is appropriate, that is measured but forceful, and that meets the moment. We're certainly not looking to escalate, but we will stand up for Canada, for Canadians, for Canadian jobs.
When did you first...
And they still announce a big package. Brian says, Trudeau announces Canada plans a massive retaliation package of 25% tariffs against $155 billion of U.S. imports to start tariffs on $30 billion of U.S. imports to take effect Tuesday, tariffs on another $125 billion in 21 days, figures in Canadian dollars. And so are we going to move that pawn into that obvious trap? Yes, we are. Thank you very much. Next question. Brian continues, Trudeau says Canada is also considering non-tariff measures against the United States, including on critical minerals, energy, and procurement. As of Tuesday, the American-made goods that could be tariffed by Canada include orange juice, peanut butter, wine, spirits, beer, coffee, appliances, apparel, footwear, motorcycles, cosmetics, and pulp and paper, per news release. The longer list of retaliatory tariffs put up for 21-day notice includes passenger vehicles and trucks, steel, and... Oh, we're going to destroy our own economy. We're going to go up into our room and hold our breath, and then you won't have us anymore. Okay, America? And America's already building their brake pads plant already. Like, they've already had... Ford and Trump have already had that conversation. Ring, ring. President, what am I going to do? Build yourself some parts factories, guy, and I'll pay for it, and then you can pay me back after Canada is a state. Ha, 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 ha. And then they smoke their cigars and hang up the phones, right? Like... Mercedes Stevenson says, Prime Minister Trudeau has not spoke with President Trump since inauguration. Reporter, did you speak to President Trump today or recently? Prime Minister Trudeau, I've been trying to reach the president since inauguration. I hope I speak with him soon. Yikes, right? Yikes. Here's Trudeau here's that interaction with the reporter talking about how he hasn't talked to Donald Trump. The thing that stood out to me about the time he went down to Mar-a-Lago right away when the tariffs were first announced and he went to have dinner, Justin Trudeau was isolated physically from his team. And the reason that was done, in my opinion, is Trump wanted to get the measure of the man. He wanted to see what does Trudeau know. And he said, why do I give you $200 billion a year? And Trudeau said, I don't know. And he said, well, I'm not going to do that. And Trudeau said, that's going to destroy our economy. And Trump said, well, maybe then you should be the governor of the 51st state. And so, like, do you think... I don't know that exchange happens if that's not Justin Trudeau, right? And some people say, oh, he's so smart, he's so this, he's so that. He's good at delivering his lines. He's quick on his feet in that he remembers the positions that he's supposed to be taking and he leans into them really well. But then he does things like people kind. You know what I mean? Then he does things like freewheels in a meeting with Donald Trump where Donald Trump's got all the numbers in his head. And Trudeau, he's got all the lines in his head, right? And that's a material difference. Here's Trudeau.
It's been since the inauguration that I've been reaching out to speak with Donald Trump. I hope to speak with him sometime soon.
Yikes, right? Hey, Canada, smarten up or I'm going to slap you around some more. Here's Runkle of the Bailey, Ian Runkle, responding to Brian Lilly. Brian Lilly says, Mel Joly met 4 senators in Washington, D.C. 2 are Liberal Democrats and 1, Tim Kaine, was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. One of the Republicans, Senator Murkowski, has voted against Trump's cabinet picks and mused about leaving the GOP over Trump. This is bad diplomacy. Why is it bad diplomacy, Ian? He says, our politicians have spent so much time shit-talking Trump and accusing their opposition of being Trump that they can't be seen to be speaking to anyone Trump-affiliated in a time that definitely requires that for diplomacy. Yes, right on. Andy Lee is talking about... probabilities and what she thinks is going to happen. And she says, I look at probabilities and statistics and odds, and the odds of us escaping a prolonged trade war with the United States unscathed are not good. Upping the threats does not increase our odds of a better outcome. Bringing in fresh government does. And Craig says, so we should just capitulate? You fought harder against your own government. And this is just a conversation they're having about what we should do with regards to this whole thing. And she says, it's irrelevant how you feel personally towards Trump at this point. He has drawn the line in the sand, and provoking him at this point is not going to be productive. He will punish Canada until he gets an administration that will work with him. I pretty much agree with that. I think his push is to put pressure on our government so our government will work with him. And if he has to wholesale replace our government with the American government, then so be it. He's fine with that. And he's said as much, okay? So I don't disagree with that assessment. I think that that's accurate. Ryan says, trigger alert, Trudeau actually said, we're all in this together. Can the guy be more dense can the guy be so dense as to use that line? It's enough that I hear that he's done it. I'm telling you that that's happened. I don't want to hear it again. Thanks very much. Terry says, the Liberal Party must stop its leadership campaign vacation now, return to Parliament, explain to Canadians what, if any, negotiations took place with the United States. We need a solution to this problem. Maybe crack down on the fentanyl. Maybe, crack down on the precursors and things like that. Actually, Andy Lee talks about that in definitely later in this series. Andy Lee says, are the other Liberal leaders candidates in regular contact with Trudeau's cabinet ministers or just you? Mark Carney says, the tariffs imposed by the United States today are a clear violation of our trade agreements and require the most serious trade and economic response in our history. See my statement. And he says in the statement, I'm in regular contact with Foreign Minister Mel Joly. I fully support her efforts along with those of Finance Minister LeBlanc, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Miller, and Minister of Public Safety McGuinty as they meet with their American counterparts. I stand four squared behind them. I don't know what that means, four square. I stand four square behind them. It sounds like it's supposed to be super duper important, but it just sounds silly. And I'm only suspicious. I don't care that Mark Carney agrees with these people. I don't care that he stands behind them. Mel Joly's been an incompetent. Mark Miller has failed at every file he's held. Dominic LeBlanc is Justin Trudeau's handler now that Chrystia Freeland's gone, I guess, and or babysitter and fixer, minister of everything now that Freeland's gone. So again, I don't trust these insiders. And I thought Mark Carney was an outsider. He's talking about these people like, oh yeah, we're all buddy, nice and tight, right? But I'm a new face with fresh ideas. Get out of here! Like, what in the world are we supposed to believe? Dan Alba says, why are you in regular contact with various Trudeau ministers? You have no democratic mandate from any Canadian to do so. Canadian to do so. I would ask Trudeau under what capacity you are making these calls that also play into your political interest, but the House of Commons is shut down. Disgraceful. So yeah, the whole thing is disgraceful. Everything is disgraceful. Stephen says the U.S. hit Canada with tariffs until it stops being a haven for drugs and criminals. Canada, we got this. Send Doug Ford to CNN to explain to Americans that this is all just a big misunderstanding. Again, I don't think that I was having a conversation with somebody who is saying the drugs at the border are only 19 kilograms or 600 odd pounds versus, hundreds of kilograms down in the southern border. Canada's not the problem. And well, actually there's a whole 3-minute thing of Rona Ambrose talking about. Basically, she says, what if Canada is even a small problem? Why not fix that small problem? If it's such a small problem, fix it. And then you can say, look, we fixed this problem and close the door on Trump being able to use that as an excuse to have this tariff war, like this trade war with us. It doesn't make any sense to say it's such a small problem. Let's let those fentanyl addicts kill themselves with the fentanyl that we're going to continue to make after we win this trade war with the United States. It doesn't make any sense. It's insane, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't want to fight a trade war to continue to be able to bring in illegals. I don't want to fight a trade war to continue to make fentanyl to send to the United States. I don't want to do that. That seems stupid, right? Like all of that seems like a bad response. And so all of what we're doing doesn't address the ask. And that's been a huge problem for weeks now, and I've been talking about it ad nauseum, so I won't go into it again today. Danielle Smith is responding to the tariffs. She says, I'm disappointed with the U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to place tariffs on all Canadian goods. This decision will harm Canadians and Americans alike. The strain the important relationship and strain the important relationship and alliance between our two nations. Alberta will do everything in its power to convince the U.S. President and Congress, as well as the American people, to reverse this mutually destructive policy. We note the reduced 10% tariff for Canadian energy, which is partially a recognition of the advocacy undertaken by our government and industry to the U.S. administration, pointing out the substantial wealth created in the U.S. by American companies and tens of thousands of American workers that upgrade and refine approximately $100 billion of Canadian crude into $300 billion of product sold all over the world by those same U.S. companies. It's also worth noting that if oil and gas exports are excluded, the United States actually sells more to Canada than Canada sells to the U.S. As I've stated to every American policymaker I've met with this past month, Canada buys more from the U.S. than any other country on earth, more than the U.K., France, Germany, Italy, and Vietnam combined. There is therefore no economic justification for tariffs imposed on Canadian goods. This is one of the reasons why I think Trump doesn't want to impose tariffs on us. He wants another solution, but these tariffs are pressure, and he wants to put pressure on, and I don't know that there's a better way to put pressure on than what he's doing. But there is a conflict here, but I think he's willing to do this short term to get what he wants longer term, medium term. Alberta, back to this. Alberta will continue our diplomatic efforts in the United States to persuade the U.S. president, lawmakers, administration officials, and American people to lift all tariffs on Canadian goods as soon as possible and to repair our relationship with the United States. I encourage all premiers and federal officials to do the same, especially as the effects of these tariffs begin to take their toll south of the border. Americans need to understand the detrimental consequences of this policy decision. Again, I think fundamentally, Americans are going to be happy with the outcome because if this lasts for any length of time, and by any length of time, I mean more than a year, they're going to build factories on an expedited path. Like they're going to call up Trump. Trump's going to give them approvals because he's got emergency powers to grant approvals for factories. They're going to build whatever factories they need, and they're going to make them in the USA. And everybody's going to wave American flags and say, USA, USA, USA. And they're going to be super duper happy of the outcome of what's going on. And Canada is going to be left out in the cold because we're going to have a whole bunch of cars and a whole bunch of parts that we can't sell because nobody wants them, because they've already replaced them because of Trump's policies. Trump's already staked out that part of the board. He already owns it all. If we move our piece into that position, he's going to take it. So you have to figure out a strategy around it, or you just drop your king. Like you've lost already. And I think we've lost already. I think we're at the point now. We might make him play the moves out, but we've lost. I think we've lost. I hope it's a series of games because this one's done. Like Alberta will also look to work collaboratively with our federal government and fellow provinces on proportionate responses to the imposed U.S. tariffs through the strategic use of Canadian import tariffs on U.S. goods that are more easily purchased from Canada and non-U.S. suppliers. This will minimize costs to Canadian consumers while creating maximum impact south of the border. All funds raised from such import tariffs should go directly to benefit Canadians most harmed by the imposed U.S. tariffs. Alberta will, however, continue to strenuously oppose any effort to ban exports to the United States or to tax our own people and businesses on goods leaving Canada for the United States. Such tactics would hurt Canadians far more than Americans. We also continue Alberta's call for the appointment of a border czar to coordinate the securing of our border against illegal migrants and drugs, moving in both directions, and to achieve our nation's 2% GDP NATO commitment by 2027. She's the only one talking about this, by the way. Justin Trudeau's not talking about NATO at all. These things should have been done for the safety of all Canadians, regardless of our trade dispute with the United States. Despite the disappointment of today's decision, there's also an incredible opportunity before us as a nation. Canada can and must now come together in an unprecedented effort to preserve the livelihoods and futures of our people and expand our political and trade relationships across the globe. We can no longer afford to be so heavily reliant on one primary customer. We must stop limiting our prosperity and inflicting economic wounds on ourselves. Rather, we must unleash the true economic potential of our country, which possesses more wealth and natural resources than any other nation on earth. And she continues a little bit more. She says, to this end, Alberta calls on the federal government and our fellow provinces to immediately commence a national effort to fast track and build oil and gas pipelines to the east and west coast of Canada, construct multiple LNG terminals on each coast, increase internal refining capacity, unleash the development of critical minerals, lower taxes, reduce red tape, tear down interprovincial trade barriers, and re-empower provinces to develop our unique economies without constant federal interference and imposition of anti-resource development laws. Our provinces and our nation can overcome the formidable economic challenges ahead, but we can only do so if we start acting like a healthy and functional country that supports every province to export their best resources and products to world markets, thereby achieving their unique potential. By doing so, Canada could become one of the most prosperous and powerful nations on earth. Alberta stands ready to do our part if this true Team Canada approach is taken. Ha ha ha. No, Team Canada is not about that whatsoever. Dave Eby says, in response to the American tariffs, I have directed government and Crown agencies to exclude U.S. suppliers from any new purchasing or procurement agreements. It's just one of those actions we are taking to prioritize Canada first. Kevin says, holy cow, it's real. Eby is shutting down liquor purchases from Republican red states only. What are these idiots thinking? So starting a trade war with your biggest trading partner and biggest customer? Yeah, I mean, like, bad idea, right? Doug Ford says President Trump's decision to tariff Canada is extremely disappointing and will hurt millions of workers on both sides of the border. We don't want to be here, but make no mistake, Canada will hit back and will hit back hard. I don't think that we have the capacity to hit back hard. If we try and hit back hard, we will, just like the postal workers strike, we will accelerate our own demise. I think it's like, is that not obvious to other people? Table Salt says, Ontario has almost 1 million jobs tied to U.S. exports. That's 12% of all jobs in Ontario. Canadian Chamber of Commerce, that's according to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. This is why Doug Ford has been emotional. He knows. So that's, yeah. Are we talking depression level recession here? Wab Canoe says it's really important right now for all Canadians to stand together and for us to be united. Manitoba fully supports the federal government's response to these tariffs. I don't know how you could fully support this federal government at all. Here is, this is in response to Team Canada, but when Trump, this is Lutnick here, and when Trump imposes a 25% tariff on Canada, he's being a bully. But when Canada imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on American dairy, it's a Canada first policy. So that's weird, right? Like, Trump's a bully, but we can impose these tariffs on dairy, etc. And that's fine. So I just think it's a weird juxtaposition. It's an interesting contrast. Here we go.
Our farmers, our ranchers, and our fishermen are the best in the world, and they are treated poorly. Canada, as we spoke about, treats our dairy farmers horribly. That's got to end. That's got to end. And if Canada is going to rely on America for its economic growth, how about you treat our farmers, our ranchers, and our fishermen with respect? And so I think the president and our Trump administration is going to improve the lives and is focused on improving the lives of our producers, our farmers, our ranchers, and our fishermen. These are vital. So I'm going to work hard to make sure, as an example, for your dairy farmers, they do much, much better in Canada than they've ever done before. And that is a key focus of this administration. Our farmers are...
So there you go. We treat their farmers terribly. We treat their ranchers terribly, right? And we should not do that. John says an important post by Real Andy Lee, which begs the question, why did the government not do this in November following the announcement by Donald Trump about his concerns involving illegal immigration and fentanyl? So Andy Lee says, this is what border security looks like. So on February 4th, this is going to be taken into consideration. Colombia did what Trump wanted and avoided tariffs, right? They flew their president's plane down there. They took the illegals back. They said, real sorry, Donald Trump, sir. We're real sorry that we did all those bad things, and we hope that you could take off the tariffs. And he said, okay, we'll take them off, but they're going to remain signed and ready to go if you guys F things up. Like, if you don't follow through, you're done, right? And I think that because Donald Trump is incentivized to get away from these tariffs too. So if Canada can prove that we're making strides in the direction of stopping fentanyl and illegals and things like that, then Trump probably backs down. But who knows? But keeps it in his, keeps his finger on the trigger rather than to the side of the weapon, right? Ish. Anyway, this is what's going on. On February 1st, 2025, Health Canada published a notice of intent proposing to advance amendments to the precursor control regulations in Schedule 9 to the Controlled Drug and Substance Acts that would increase oversight of precursors. So you can't bring in precursor chemicals into Canada as easily anymore. Hey, that's something. That's interesting, right? Like, that's something you could put in your little package of, dear Mr. Trump, please take the 25% tariffs off now. We'd really appreciate it, Canada, right? That's something you could tell him. Like saying, sir, you're wrong. Sir, Canada's not the problem. Sir, it's actually Mexico. Sir, it's China sending things into Mexico. It's not Canada. that's not going to solve the problem, because he says, I can see your closet right there. I can see all your crap in the closet right there. And that's not what I meant by clean your room. And you damn well knew it. Right? And so this is something you can put in and say, look, the closet's clean. Tom Quiggin says, Sam Cooper, among others, has been warning about Chinese infiltration of Canada for years, including the use of fentanyl as a political weapon. Now we pay the price in Canada for Trudeau having sold us out in favor of his Chinese friends. So Sam Cooper says more on this file next week. Exclusive briefings to the Liberal government on Chinese infiltration of Vancouver ports and Canada's opioid scourge were ignored. So, I mean, I'm shocked. I'm totally shocked that Canada is ignoring this whole thing. The reason Canada is ignoring it is because they're being told to ignore it, because infiltrated by China, I think, probably. Here's Cat Turd. And when Cat Turd's talking about Canada, it's funny, but not great. And he says, resign today, loser, of Justin Trudeau. And Cat Canada says, Trudeau lays out what Canada started doing to address the U.S. border security concerns: patrol helicopters, K-9 teams, imaging tools. He then begs the U.S. to consider that Canada is what the U.S. needs for its long-term prosperity and global security. No, the Trump administration is very clear that Canada is a security threat because it's infiltrated by Chinese. So that's just one layer. There are other layers. Fentanyl is not so good. Key says, much chatter today about the tariffs, counter tariffs, buying Canadian, Team Canada, blah, 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 but nothing about securing the border, increasing NATO funding, and sending illegals back to their homelands. Squat, nothing, Zippo. Enjoy the upcoming hard times, Canadians. You voted for these inept Liberals and parasitic NDPs, and now you can learn to live with the results. Yeah, so it's one of those things where I think that these people in the Canadian government have one lens that they view things through. And just because you can't build a factory in 6 weeks in Canada doesn't mean Ford and Donald Trump can't build a factory in 6 weeks at Flint, Michigan, or anywhere close enough to the Ford plants that they can just source it nice and easy. And it'll be you won't have to have any international anything. You won't have to cross the border. It's physically closer. I mean, why Flint, Michigan, right? Make it right next to the plant. Who knows? But fundamentally, Trump is encouraging this, and this is an opportunity. And our Liberals don't understand that Trump sees it as an opportunity. They would only see crisis. You see? And so they can't possibly conceive that Trump would lean into this and use this to his advantage. Here's Rona Ambrose, and she's talking about this whole thing. And it's medium long. We might have to listen to 3 minutes, but it doesn't feel like 3 minutes. It's one of those where she just keeps making good points. So I'll let it run a little bit. I'll stop it when it makes sense, but I think that we're going to listen to most of it. Here we go.
Council, and you just heard from Mr. Hall saying everything is on the table. It doesn't seem like every premier is willing to put everything on the table, because last time a lot of people said it worked because there was a true Team Canada approach. Do you think that's lacking this time?
I think, look, if it is lacking, it falls on the shoulders of the Prime Minister because of if anything, the fiscal policy that this government has had over the last 10 years. I mean, let's step back and reflect on where we're at. First of all, it's great to hear that everything's on the table when Parliament isn't even in session. The people of Canada have elected their representative to sit in the House and address these types of issues. Parliament should be recalled immediately. The fact that we're all discussing these issues and lots of smart people are weighing in is great. But here's a thought. The people that are elected by Canadians should be talking about this in Parliament. There is nothing stopping the Prime Minister from recalling Parliament and having those people that are duly elected by Canadians that represent the will of Canadians discussing one of the biggest economic crises in the last decade. And second to that, there may not be this sense of unity because a lot of this falls on the Prime Minister's shoulders. We have a weakened, vulnerable economy, and that is all on him. It's not on President Trump. So we go into a trade war being one of the most unproductive countries in the OECD, having not addressed these issues when we knew Trump was going to be elected. We knew this at the end of October, definitely the beginning of November. Did we do anything to pivot to make our economy more competitive? No, we did nothing. In fact, we raised capital gains taxes on inventors and entrepreneurs and small business owners, which has been a drain on the economy. We can't attract capital into this country, and we have an issue of productivity and job creation. And now we're facing a president, which we knew wanted to create the most competitive country in the world. And he's doing exactly that in a very bold fashion. So it's not just about how we retaliate, it's about how we get our own house in order. And how have we responded? We've done nothing to date. I would also say this. Because I'm upset at the way that prime ministers run the country, does not mean I am pro-Trump or pro his agenda, but I have to ask the prime minister, I have not heard him address the issue of fentanyl once. I don't know a lot about fentanyl. I do know that precursors were a problem even when we were in government a decade ago. They continue to be a problem coming in from China into Canada. We know that there's been busts of super labs that are created just for export of fentanyl to the United States. So even if the fentanyl issue is a small one, we have not heard the Foreign Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada, mention anything about this other than to say, we're not Mexico, we're not the problem. What if we're a tiny bit of the problem? Why can't we at least address the issue? It would just close one of the doors that seems to be open for the president to walk through and attack us on. So I would say on a number of fronts, I don't feel a ton of confidence that I feel like we've been just waiting for this trade war. And now of course, we're going to have to retaliate. We have to walk into this and do as much as possible to retaliate dollar for dollar. But that could also include retaliating on oil and gas, which is
right? Up until that point, I was like, yeah. And then now she says all the same things as all the other liberals. So I don't understand why we have to retaliate dollar for dollar. We say, listen, Mr. Trump, we're going to spend crap tons of money cracking down on fentanyl and our border, and we're going to stop these ridiculous policies that have caused these issues, and we're going to do that yesterday. Sorry that it took us so long. But, dollar for dollar retaliatory tariffs. It's just going to damage Canada because they're going to say, bye, Canada, and they're going to get their own stuff there. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful